Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing another movie review. This movie is a horror film from the United States, English language, released in the year 2015, directed by Mickey Keating, and this film is called Pod. So Pod is about a main character. He has a very troubled family. His sister is into drugs, and she's really off the rails, and he's got a brother who's a recluse. Now the brother has a history of mental illness, and one day he gets a phone call from his brother saying that he's caught something in his basement. Now this brother lives in a very secluded area, and initially the main character thinks that this brother has gone through a period of psychosis, that he's had a relapse. So he gets his sister to travel to this remote location in order to try and convince the brother to get the help that he needs. But when they get there, things spiral out of control when this brother is hell-bent on preventing anyone from getting inside the basement. So this makes the main character believe that he's done something horrible. Maybe he's kidnapped someone or hurt someone. So he's trying desperately to get through the door, but the brother is saying this is going to be the worst decision of your life. So what's behind the door and whether or not there is something, or in fact it is a period of psychosis, is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Pod. I definitely think Pod really sums up Mickey Keating as a director. There are moments of brilliance in this film, but unfortunately the brilliance, it just doesn't gel together to make an overall brilliant film. And that's a criticism I have of a lot of his movies. You know, there are plenty of films that have those moments of absolute greatness, but overall they just don't feel as though they match those periods of greatness. So it does indicate that this director is going on to bigger and better things, but I think Pod really does fall down that trap that a lot of other Mickey Keating films have, in that he doesn't really utilise all those periods of brilliance. So they're very sporadic moments, and those sporadic moments make the film worth watching, but unfortunately it's not quite as good as it really should be. So this is a psychological horror film mixing in with a science fiction horror film, and I think the level of uncertainty and not knowing what's behind the basement door for the first 3/4 of this film is what really drives it forward, is that you do get that sense of panic, and that panic is magnified by the frenetic pacing of the exchanges of these characters. Most of the film is in dialogue, and I think Mickey Keating does a really good job at actually capturing your interest with not much going on, and that's because of that frenetic pacing. It's because of the mania. It's because of this guy saying, don't go behind the door, you know, the government are out to get me. It's got that real intensity to it that does keep you on the edge of your seat, and I thought for the majority of this film it really had me. And there are problems to that frenetic pacing that I'll go into a little bit later, but overall I thought that it takes a lot of skill to really capture an audience and really scare an audience by what the characters are saying. And so that was by far the best aspect of the film, is that the psychology really does seep through and it really hits you hard. On top of that, the psychology is matched very well by the atmosphere and the visuals. Mickey Keating does have a very fine eye for capturing a moment. He's got some very stylish approaches to his cinematography, which is something that does indicate that he's a director of his own style, which is something you can always appreciate. There's a lot of directors out there who are copying styles that are successful from the past, but Mickey Keating is definitely a director of his own. And so as far as low-budget independent horror films are concerned, I definitely think that Mickey Keating is going on to bigger and better things, but I don't really think he's improving off his mistakes at the moment. So the acting was fairly competent, although once again I do have a problem with the characters involved, and I thought that right at the end of the film it does hit you on some degree, but once again the ending is a little bit of a problem. But you know, there are moments in this film that really captured me, and so I thought, okay, the frenetic pacing is making me exhausted. It actually gets you into the mindset of a guy who might be losing his mind, but then again, maybe he's onto something. So it's that sense of uncertainty that really does capture the viewer, but unfortunately, the fact that it's so frenetic and that these characters are non-existent, it really does become a problem, is that you don't really care about what's going on. It's more a case of atmosphere substituting good characters, and this is something that was evident in his other film Carnage Park and a few of his other earlier films, is that you don't really get into the characters as much. So when they start bickering and that frenetic pace, it's only got one gear basically. So after a while it does start to wear a little bit thin, and the characters start to really grind on you, because it seems like all they're doing in this film is bickering with each other. So you just think to yourself, just shut up, please, just give me some peace and quiet. And that's how I felt by about the halfway stage. Although it doesn't completely derail the experience, I thought, alright, it's just got one gear, it's a frenetic pace, but it needs something else. It needs a little break maybe, or just needs a little bit of elevation, or just just something else instead of just going at this frenetic balls to the wall pace. So it goes to 78 minutes, so it never gets boring, and that's a positive. But unfortunately I just thought the characters really wore on me, and it just didn't really create any sympathy for anybody involved. And it does go down stereotypical sort of character traits, in that you have seen this sort of thing before, and they're so far over the top. So that's another thing that you can really disconnect yourself from, the fact that these characters are overdoing it a little bit. bit as far as the acting is concerned. So there's competent acting, but I just don't think the overall characters allowed these actors to really shine and show what they're capable of. And then right at the end, it does lose its ambiguity. And this is a problem I have with a lot of films, is that when you really spell things out, what was the point of having the ambiguity leading up to it? If you have a lot of loose ends at the end of the film, then it complements the ambiguity from the first minute to the last minute. But unfortunately, when you spell everything out, it's the old saying of the viewer needs comfort. The viewer needs to know what's going on, and I don't think viewers really appreciate endings that make you think, that make you draw your own conclusions. And so that's Mickey Keating. That is the reason why I think this movie does have periods of brilliance, but unfortunately those brilliance are worn down a little bit by the negatives that are present in this film. So as I said, Mickey Keating is definitely an interesting director. I'm a fan of this guy, but unfortunately it's just those tiny errors that just, it clouds his work, and hopefully in the future he can really polish that up and start to make films that I know he can make. So overall for Pod, going to give this one 2.5 stars. Alright guys, this is my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies and I'll see you there. Bye.